This is episode 81 of our Road to Unicum, and today we review the T95. This is the Tier 9 American tank destroyer in World of Tanks, and it has a pretty fearsome reputation due to the strength of its armor profile. Now, carrying around all that armor does certainly have a major downside. The tank is very, very slow with a limited top speed, just barely over 20 kilometers per hour, and the acceleration is likewise relatively poor. But what you get from all this armor is fantastic frontal protection. The hull itself, not including the two cupolas, offers well in excess of 300 millimeters of armor, and for the most part, things are not going to penetrate you frontally. The cupolas are relatively small targets. They offer about 212 millimeters of effective armor, and so that in itself is not bad. Like a lot of Tier 8 tanks, for example, even if they hit the cupola dead on, are going to struggle to pen it. So the main thing you need to be careful about this tank, obviously you don't want to get flanked because it's slow. And the other thing is, if you're fighting higher tier tanks, you want to be wary of firing and leaving yourself open for a window of time where they can aim in and shoot at your cupola, because then they can, especially for Tier 9 and definitely Tier 10 tanks, they can penetrate it pretty consistently if they have guns that handle pretty well and have good accuracy. I found this out the hard way. Like, the thing about the T95 is it really plays best at a distance when you're facing enemies of about 200 meters in distance, so about half of the view range circle. And the reason for that is pretty simple. If you're that distance, you can wiggle around a bit and make it really hard for them to target either of your two cupolas. The closer you get, like once you're within like 50 to 100 meters, they can aim in if they've got accurate guns and hit it with pretty solid reliability. There is a sliver along the bottom of the lower front hull, which is I'll say it in air quotes, weak spot, but it still offers over 240 millimeters of effective protection, so it's really strong. Notice that in this Fisherman's Bay battle, I took the long road. So take the A lane all the way down to about the 8 lane, and then from there drive straight north-south. It's really important. You don't want to cut a diagonal from the spawn, especially crossing the area around B7 and C7, because if you do that, you're going to get spotted. Tanks are going to be firing at your exposed flanks, and you'll be vulnerable to arty. It's a real easy way to give up chunks of hit points for no meaningful reason. It does take a little while to drive down to A8 and then drive south on the 8 lane, but it's much better to do that than to risk giving up chunks of hit points early in the battle. Now, the other thing, which is a little bit of an issue, there's an E5 in front of me, of course, and then the 257. Now, the thing is, I want to try to close the gap as much as possible, and by kind of doing that, I'm shutting the door on the 257. If I keep driving forward, the only way the 257 is going to be able to aim at me is if he continues to drive and face around the corner. But if he's facing around the corner, his turret is going to be faced sideways, and that will make that easier for opposing tanks to penetrate him. That really wasn't a very good shot. I should have been aiming a little bit lower and inside on the lower hull. But nonetheless, continuing to close the gap. In this particular battle, I didn't have coated optics equipped. I think the 3 best choices for equipment on this tank, and by the way, you'll always know what I recommend as equipment if you look in the description of a video, or if you just watch the first 10-second intro, you can look and see what my crew skills are and what equipment I have mounted. You definitely want a rammer because of the long reload. You don't need gun laying drive, right? Gun laying drive reduces the time to aim, which can be really helpful for limiting your exposure. But because this tank has such good frontal protection, you don't really need to worry about that. The only thing I need to worry about here as I'm crossing down the slam heading east along the F lane is taking flanking fire from their tanks that are in the middle. So that's why I've decided to turn around here, face toward them, and then I'm going to cut around the corner hard. So definitely rammer for equipment. I recommend vents because you don't need gun laying drive, because the armor on this tank is so meaningful that you can often aim in because your armor is very reliable. And then the third piece of equipment may come as a little bit of a surprise. I use coated optics. Now, for a lot of tank destroyer players, they often take binoculars, which makes sense, especially if you're in a squishy tank destroyer that you really want to make sure that you outspot your opponents and keep your distance. But in a tank like the T95, it's really meant to be pushing the front of the lines. Now, like I said, you don't want to get too close to make it easy for opponents to aim in on your cupola, and part of that will depend on the accuracy of their guns. right? But because the tank is slow, just like I talked about in the T28 video, and by the way, you can see our Jagdtiger, he's overexposing himself to flanking fire from their tanks that are in the middle of the map. It's really dangerous to push along the edge if you don't have the control of the middle. And so that's really the only thing keeping them in this game at this point, are that Progetto and that AMX that have been spotted in the middle. And that's why I'm taking the time. I'm going to go ahead and put some pressure on these guys and hopefully kill or just push them off. Now this AMX is in a very clever position. He's actually mostly hull down behind that standard B, so he's not offering very good shots. But we got to get rid of him. We can't just keep driving along south. You can if you get south of the road down by that pond over at J8, but I want to get rid of this guy from the middle because he's just going to be a real pain if we don't take care of him. So that third equipment slot, like I said, I highly recommend using coated optics because this is not a squishy tank destroyer, and because this is really designed to be engaging opponents and brawling a lot more than your typical tank destroyer. You're going to be wanting to push toward the front of the action, and if you've got coated optics equipped, which I don't in this battle, but I think I do in the next one after this, what that allows you to do if you're fighting toward the front lines is that when they're tanks that have not been spotted or currently unspotted fire, if they're within that 445 meter view range, you have a pretty good chance of spotting them. And it might sound counterintuitive, but in this tank, if you've got coated optics, brothers in arms, vents, and situational awareness, you can push your view range out to close to 450 meters, right? And then this way, like a lot of tank destroyer players, by the way, also use camo nets. I don't, and I can't think of a tank destroyer offhand that I use the camo net. And usually if you've got binoculars and you're leveraging bushes correctly, that'll be enough. Because for most tank destroyers, you want the rammer, because tank destroyers tend to have big guns that have longer reload times, or tank destroyers just have powerful guns and or good DPM, so you want to maximize that as much as possible. What's really important here is I'm pushing along the J lane because I'm more likely to spot targets than the other tanks that we have on our team, and I want to get close enough to get to that sniper's hill down around where that Scorpion is, right? So around the J3, K3 area. And I also just can't sit back. We are in danger of losing the northwest section of the map. The only tanks that we have currently holding them are our Striv S1, which is a tier 8, and then the FV4005. Notice, as I've been driving west, the nice thing is our E100 pushed up to middle, which you should do, right? And so that's causing the Progetto 46 to back off. But notice, right before that Progetto fired on me, because I had been spotted, I turned my hull a little bit to face him. And what's crazy about the T95 is the side armor is 152.4 millimeters thick. What that really means, and it's also sloped. You can see it's kind of sloped diagonally up towards the roof of the superstructure. But what that allows you to do, if you're driving at opponents at roughly a 30 to 35 degree angle, the side armor becomes auto bounce. It's just crazy, right? And so you don't even have to be pointed fully. If you're being shot at from the side, you don't have to be fully pointed at a target to protect against it. Even if, like I said, you're facing at 35 degrees left or right of the target, they're most likely going to bounce. Now, here, this is a little bit of a tough spot. If I keep moving forward, I'm at risk of allowing the Progetto to have side flanking shots because there's, a stretch of no cover here, so I'm going to be easily spottable. But at some point, I need to make that push, and it looks like we've stalled their push in the northwest corner of the map. They did manage to take out our FV4005, but our Striv is sitting in some bushes over near our spawn point, and so their Object 430 is going to have trouble. He's not going to get the first shot advantage on our Striv if the Striv is playing correctly. Okay, so I'm close enough, and the goal here, I don't necessarily need to get the first shot on these tanks. I just need to keep them lit to give something for our E75 and our Jagdtiger to do. And while I was playing this game, what I didn't realize is that our Jagdtiger had somehow flipped his tank over, so he wasn't going to be able to help. And this is like part of the awesome beauty of having a 750 alpha gun. Is it's so punishing, whether you're talking about single shot trades or that first shot advantage. The damage is just amazing. So this 268 V4, obviously tier 10, a better tank than what I'm driving, but what I really want to do, I get one shot into him, so now he's one shotable. I was tracked, and I do run double repair kit, by the way. I do recommend that in this tank because getting tracked is the main danger because you're slow. But I haven't actually been set on fire all that much in this tank, and so I found running without a fire extinguisher in a heavily armored tank like this is, it does work. It's okay. Some tanks, like if you run without a fire extinguisher, they're brittle and get set on fire a lot. It's super annoying, but this kind of tank, like I said, partly because the side armor is so good. As long as you are angling a bit relative to your target, you're going to bounce a lot of shells. So, obviously we've pushed them out of Southwest. Really, their tanks that were sitting at Southwest were their best hopes of like rallying, but at this point, like I still have like 95% of my hit points. So, we're really in no meaningful danger of losing. And, our E75 is playing it safe, but this is one of these cases where I think we could have just pressed W and rolled to victory. The main thing is, you'll notice as I pushed west along the J lane, I did it partly because I knew I had help behind me. So anything that I spot, we're going to potentially, I'll get some assisted damage, but just more importantly, we'll have our friendly tank shooting at them, including our GW Tiger, right? So, okay, they're finally pushed up. Our Striv, for some reason, has moved closer to those mediums. That's not what I would do. I would kind of sit back around A5. There are a bunch of bushes. And so, there's no reason for him to get close. What he wants to have is that first shot advantage and then the ability to hopefully fire and then not get spotted. All right, that was just a pretty unlucky shot there on their RDOs, pretty much aimed in. But, the nice thing is we know where they are now. Their 430 still has the bulk of his hit points. Their Progetto, their Scorpion is pretty beat up. And look at this, the reload is so long, they already really should have moved. I mean, once he bounced a shell from me, he's got to know that he's spotted. There's no sense for him to just sit there and take it. I mean, he allowed me to reload this gun, which is, we'll see what it is, but it's like well over 12 seconds, I think. Okay, and this 430 is coming in. It's important. Okay, so yeah, 15.1 reload with Brother-in-Arms and with a rammer and with vents. Now, the interesting thing is, some players will run a cheating mod. That 430, is he counting? I'm bluffing right now. Obviously, I'm not reloaded, but I'm acting like I am to get him to back off, and he does what I want him to do, which is to not flank me, right? If he does flank me, the only tank that's nearby is E100, and he's slow. And so I'm not really worried about this Scorpion. He's not a risk to run by me. It's really this 430 they got to worry about. And, because I bluffed him off, this allows me to go ahead and bully him. And I can give up these hit points. I don't care if these guys are shooting me because we had such a hit. I had so much hit points conserved to the end of the match that I could afford to trade for them, 1 for 1 because my gun does more than, twice the damage of that 430. Okay, so I think that's like 4.9 thousand damage in that battle. In this particular battle, it looks like I'm running the coated optics. You can see that circle, the white circle, there is no green line. There's a green line that represents what your view range in a tank is, but if you push your view range all the way out to the white circle, that's 445 meters, that's the max spotting range. You really want to try to get to 445 whenever you can in lights and mediums, and then in tank destroyers, either with coated optics if they're brawlers or with binocs if they are squishy snipers. And then, of course, when you go to Lakeville in city from either edge of the map, you want to stay very close to the edge of the map. In this case, we're staying down in the ditch. It decreases the probability that we are going to get spotted. And even if we're spotted, like a flat tank like this, the T95, is mostly going to be safe from enemy fire until that brief moment when you kind of climb up the little rise over by K7 and you exit the ditch. But again, it's all about minimizing your exposure, not letting them spot you. Obviously, paying for camo on the hull of your tank. I do it in every tank, partly because for the aesthetic it looks better. But why not boost your camo that fraction? You work it up every little piece that you can get. And so, because this game, it really revolves around the first shot advantage, especially from distance, and, obviously you don't want to, I see so many players taking, too sharp of approaches or going across open stretches when they could be moving behind a ridge or a rock or building or sitting next to a bush to the side where they're totally visible instead of sitting behind it. Now, obviously in a map like this, once you get into the city, there really isn't any kind of vision game in the city brawl itself. The main thing you need to be worried about, aside from getting shot by the tanks that you're brawling with in city, are tanks that are going to be on the northern half, from the south spawn, northern half of the mid road, or sitting back like around the, like say the A8, A9 area sniping. One thing that's really good is we've already softened up their Conqueror. This is probably, I don't have XVM, I don't play with any mods ever, but this is, probably their best player. He's not getting a lot of support, and we've already softened him up quite a bit. So that's the glory of having that 750 alpha. It is so punishing. And you know what's really interesting, I do it statistically better in the T30 than in this tank, but what I found is that, you know, the ability to really put heavy shots into players and then pull back under cover, it's so powerful. Or even that, like, you know, I kind of like sort of snapshot of the IS-3A's turret, which is obnoxious, right? And while I am close to him, you know, remember I talked about getting close to enemy tanks can make it easy for them to aim in on your cupola, but in this case, you know, Russian heavies tend to be good brawlers, but they don't have very good gun handling or accuracy. And that shot right there is a little bit of a troll bounce on the IS-6, which is a bummer, but you know what's going to happen. What I want to do is cross this gap. I don't want to sit here because I can get shot from, see, I'm clicking on the map. Their JAG-TIG is somewhere over there, so I want to put this church between us, so the only guys who can shoot us are the guys that I can also return fire on. And you know, this, you know, again, penetration's just so good. 276 with silver AP, you know, pushing I think around neighborhood of 300 or more. You know, if you dab the 2 key for your premium ammo, but you know, obviously, as you guys have heard me before talk about, you know, this is my original watt count. I've never used premium ammo in random battles. Certainly I do for pre-mades, and you know, if I still did ranked, which I don't bother with anymore based on how grindy it is. But anyway, but you know, like a tank, the great thing about tank destroyers in a lot of cases, especially this one, like the 276 silver AP penetration is highly functional. You know, and the gun is accurate enough that, you know, if you need to aim in on weak spots like lower plates and such, you can go ahead and do that. Notice, you know, I've been staying toward the front of the battle pretty much. You know, when obviously, you know, had to take a bit of a roundabout route, the safe conservative route getting into the city, taking the K lane and then taking the 0 lane up. But I'm trying not to stop as much as possible except when I need to fire, because I want to provide that spotting benefit to my team. Because there are tanks like this defender in front of me, or the IS-3, they're not going to be able to outspot tank destroyers and such. Now, I probably won't either. Any light, medium tank or tank destroyer that's playing their tank properly and either staying at a certain distance, and especially if they're using soft cover, they'll outspot me because I'm going to be driving in the open. The difference, of course, is I've got really good armor. So if they shoot at me, that's okay. And really, see, this defender, he shouldn't be pushing across yet, right? He should, what I would do, especially since this is a tier 10 battle, is just wait a little bit. You know, let me get out in front. They can shoot at me. They will most likely not penetrate me. They will then be spotted, and then, you know, tanks like our defender can go and fire on them. Now, I'm not saying the defender made a terrible play, right? Because he crossed the gap, and now because he's close to the shoreline, he's low enough that they don't really have any kind of decent shot on him, and the only thing he needs to worry about is getting shot by Artie. Right, again, it's like this, that tier 8 tank destroyer actually has those Soviet tank destroyers, pretty good frontal armor, but it's like, doesn't matter. You know, 276 silver pen, no problem whatsoever. Okay, now this is one of these interesting situations. Obviously, I am totally exposed to arty fire, but I'm down in the depression, so their tanks won't be able to shoot me until I choose to peek and show myself. Now, this is like one of the areas where you need to determine what's the higher risk. If I face to the right to shoot on the J Panther, I'm giving up myself to the Striv 103 and to the Scorpion, right? And I'm more worried about those guys' guns than I am with the J Panther. And you can see I took a peek over the J Panther. He's facing to these. He's not even looking at me, right? So there are times when you can pass tanks. Like in a tank like this that doesn't have a turret, you've got to make decisions like this sometime. I know some people would just kind of sit back and do nothing because they don't want to get shot at. But, you know, in this case, great armor, carefully conserving my hit points, I should take the risk, right? And I'm wiggling just enough to disrupt that Scorpion's ability to hit my cupolas, and same with that Striv 103. Now, the earlier shot that I fired on that Striv 103 was AP, and I fire AP again. The problem is that, you know, the Striv 103 is not showing me a lot of his hull. I should have switched that second shot over to high explosive, because if I hit him anywhere, the explosion from the high explosive is going to kill him. It doesn't matter if it shows red, no pen, doesn't matter. If I just tap him anywhere, even if I hit the dirt or rocks near him, he's a goner. So that second shot that I fired AP, poor ammo selection, and you want to have good awareness with targets that are low. There are some players that are obsessed with firing high explosive and trying to get big rolls. I'll only typically do it if a target is really low, or if they're very squishy, like the Scorpion here, right? The interesting thing about, you know, the one thing to check with high explosive, two things really. What is the differential in the alpha between the high explosive round and then the AP or APCR round? So in this case, it's 950 versus 750. You know, 200 alpha more, not necessarily a monstrous difference. The other thing to check is how high the HE penetration is. There are some tanks that have unusually high penetration values on their high explosives, this doesn't happen to be one of them meaningfully, but the ones that do kind of tilt the scales in using a higher amount of high explosive. This is true, for example, of the new French wheeled light vehicles, which I am currently grinding through the tier 6 and will be really happy to review with you guys. Okay, so this hopefully gives you a good idea about playing the T95. It's a really tough tank. The speed can be kind of frustrating because sometimes you can be left out of battles or things can happen without you, but that's why it's important to be really assertive and proactive. If you like the video, please make sure to click like on it, and if you want to receive a notification for every video that I post, make sure to tap the notification bell next to the subscribe button. Hope you enjoyed it. Take care.